So I thought to start out, 15 minutes is a really short amount of time. So I thought how to do this in a way that I can give you something actually meaningful. So I was thinking about these TED Talks. I don't know if people are familiar with the TED conference. I'm sure this is not going to be as good as a TED Talk, especially because I didn't memorize my whole talk, but I thought what's important in TED Talks is that people have a very clear, simple, and important message. So I kind of thought, all right, today our issue is what is quality in education, and I'm really glad that Hvordan gave us a really useful, meaningful overview of what quality is in education, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit to what we do in terms of learning activities when we are with students. That's the area that I'm going to be focusing on. So I have two take-home messages. One is that, of course, quality means that students are learning. And not just learning anything, but learning the things that we have decided are important for them to learn. And the second is that there are 50 years of research that show that students learn when they're engaged. And it is more complex than that. I had a conversation with Hvordan about this yesterday. We want them to engage in deep learning, not just to be kind of running around the room or actively writing notes. It's more than just activation, right? But we do think that it's important. We know that it's important for students to be engaged, that there is a positive correlation between student engagement and learning. So today I'm going to tell a story about a course that I teach in the Institutt's pedagogikk program. And the reason that I was asked to share this course is because I do some things in the course that are quite different from what typically happens in a course. So this course is different than what most of you teach because, first of all, I'm not teaching students. There are colleagues in the room. It's also a much smaller group. And we use theater techniques from a tradition called Theater of the Oppressed, which I've been facilitating for about 8 years. But the most important thing I want you to take away is that you can make your teaching engaging even if you don't have Theater of the Oppressed techniques in your back pocket or if you're teaching larger groups. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. So this course is called Hot Moments in Teaching and Learning, Handling Conflict or Tension in the Classroom or in Supervision Situations. And sometimes people are curious, hot moments? Are you talking about sexy moments? No, we're talking about conflictual or tense moments in the class. And I'm going to tell you a story about the class, but before I tell you the story, I just want to give you a little overview of what this course is actually about and what we do. And so to do that, I'm going to share the learning outcomes. One of the learning outcomes seems to have disappeared, but that's all right. The reason I want to share the learning outcomes is that everything that we do in the course is chosen because I'm focused on what is it that I want people in the room to learn from this experience. And I start designing the course by sitting down and thinking, okay, what is it that's important here? What are my intentions for the participants learning? I formulate that, and then that drives everything. In this course, the participants do need to write a reflection paper at the end, but we're not assigning them grades, right? So this question of assessment is a little bit different than in most situations. So these learning outcomes are related to knowledge. So one of the things we want them to learn is that they are able to, by the end of the course, apply their own analysis on a hot moment and select amongst a variety of approaches to transform a hot moment into a learning opportunity. And also we'd like them to assess the role of emotions, to be able to assess the role of emotions in learning. And there was another one that isn't there. I don't remember it. There's also, it just showed up. That they will be able to evaluate multiple perspectives on how to handle controversial topics in higher education teaching and learning. So these are the knowledge-based learning outcomes. And there's also two other learning outcomes in skills and general competencies. One is that they will recognize their own emotional triggers in teaching and learning situations. So what is it that makes you freeze up, become uncomfortable, get emotional in the classroom? And also that they will reflect upon their own role as teachers in dealing with conflict or tension in the classroom or in supervision situations, in any kind of teaching situation. All right, we'll get to this in a moment. So the way this course goes, it's a 3-day course. The first day, we don't do any theater at all. We start with concepts. And I have actually a pensum for this course. And the way I organize that pensum is I want people to apply knowledge from the literature in the things that we're doing, even though we're mostly engaging in theater activities. I want there to be real course content that's meaningful and that's applicable. So what I have done is I have this kind of long pensum that has quite a few, 12 articles on it, but I've organized them into categories. And what I ask the participants to do is to choose one article from each category that they're interested in reading to read before they come to the course. So this way they have some choice. Everyone comes with some familiarity of the important concepts. And this is important because the participants in the courses that I teach, I mean, you don't have a lot of time, right, to do a lot of reading about Universitetspedagogikk. But I think it's important that people come with some knowledge that they can then apply. On the first day, we talk about some of the literature that they've read, and they sit in groups and work on case studies, which are real case studies from people that I know in Norway who have experienced a hot moment in the classroom. And then at the end of the day, they start doing some reflective writing, where I ask them to think about a hot moment that they've experienced, either in teaching or in supervision, classroom teaching or in supervision, and they need to write it in a lot of detail. It's a kind of guided writing, and some people really like it and some people hate it, but they do it. And on the second and third day, we start with different kinds of theater activities, and then we move to this form called forum theater. And forum theater, you can think about it on a simple level as a kind of role play. So I take a story from the group, someone who's willing to share, and construct a short scene. So the scene is based on their story, but the scene gets changed. I heighten the drama, make more at stake. The participant who shared the story is usually in the role as the main character, the teacher in the situation, and we choose other participants to play the other roles. So here's an example of one of the stories that we did. So in this example, you see that there is a teacher sitting at a desk. She is a young female instructor, and the students, there are 3 students visible in this image. One of them is looking a little aggravated. He's presenting on his research proposal. And there's, meanwhile, 2 other students sitting in the front. So this is one of the scenes that we created. This student who was presenting his proposal, what happened in this situation is that he presented, and then the instructor and the peers were giving him feedback. And when the instructor started giving her feedback, which she thought was friendly, constructive, but critical feedback, this student who had presented became very defensive. He is a male international student. He started, kind of arguing against every comment that she made in a way that she was very surprised with and not sure how to deal with. And the situation became very tense and uncomfortable. And meanwhile, these 2 other students sitting on the side started kind of whispering and giggling a little bit, like in a distracting way, maybe thinking the whole situation was rather funny. So this was the story. The participants in the room, so remember there's 4 actors now, and the rest of the group is watching. And they see the play once, and then the second time they see the play, they're invited to look and see, when do they see the teacher starting to struggle? And when they do see the teacher struggling, they're invited to shout, "Stop." Then they come up and replace the teacher and try something different. What's really important for me to say here is that in this method, the idea is not to come to the best solution, but rather through the process to start to unearth the complexities in the situation and understand them from multiple perspectives. So what happened here, and this is very interesting, this was the first time I taught the course in 2012 that we had this story. And let's see, unorganized. Right, so here's what happened. We saw this once, then we had maybe 2 different people from the group come up and try to replace this teacher and try different things, and they worked to varying degrees, and we discussed what they did and why they did it and what the consequences were. We had conversation about what is the role of the instructor's age in this situation, of the instructor's gender in the situation. And then we had a young male professor in the group who volunteered to come up and try something different. Okay, so I just wanted to make this really clear because it's a kind of complicated structure so you understand what actually was happening. So now this participant in the course is up there and he's trying something else. And actually he is doing a pretty good job engaging this recalcitrant defensive student. The student was getting more calm. The instructor was somehow conveying that he was listening. He was still giving critical feedback, but he was being understanding and listening. And then these two students at the bottom are still giggling and whispering and becoming increasingly distracted. So finally, the teacher is getting a little frustrated, and he sort of comments to the student who had been presenting. La oss fortsette denne samtalen senere, siden disse studiene her gjør det vanskelig å prate mer om dette nå. Okay, so after another minute or two, I stop the scene, that's part of my role, and turn to the rest of the participants to ask for feedback. You know, what did you think? What did you notice? What did you see? And one of the women in the group who had been in the audience turned and pointed to the guy who had played the teacher and said, when he referred to those female students as studina, that was microaggression. Okay, so I don't know how many people are familiar in here with the concept of microaggression, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time defining it. If you want to know, you can come take the course. Or you can look it up. It's actually a very useful concept for teaching. But in this case, I'll say what it kind of meant from her perspective is that it was unintended sexism, unintended but still hurtful sexism, for that teacher to refer to the students as studina. And what's really important for me to emphasize is that microaggression is a key course concept, right? So here suddenly, in this play that we're doing, the course concept pops its head up and embeds itself right in the middle of the activity. This generated a huge amount of discussion. So as soon as she said it, it was like, whoom, like a flame burst up in the room, right? And everyone in the group is like discussing it and talking about it. Is it microaggression? Is it not microaggression? What were the consequences? What were not the consequences? One of the people who had acted out one of these annoying students said, when he made that comment, I felt this small. So we're engaging emotions. The participants are engaged emotionally, they're engaged socially, and they're engaged intellectually, academically. The male professor who made the comment argued that he didn't really think of studina as negatively laden, he didn't really think it was microaggressive, and he sort of defended himself. One of the things he said was, jeg har et godt forhold til studina. So it didn't really make that situation better. But so this was amusing, you know, it was also heated and exciting, but the point that I really want to make is that this group of people who are in the class, they are never going to forget what microaggression is and what the implications are of microaggression in a teaching situation and what their own role is as an educator if something microaggressive occurs in the classroom. This is the goal of the course. And I couldn't have engineered the situation better than how it actually ended up happening. But we had a real hands-on, so that's reminding me that I have 2 more minutes. So we had a real situation during which we could explore the course concepts in a meaningful, engaging way. So very quickly, I just wanted to share 2 or 3 written feedback from participants. So one says, the course has allowed me to start thinking of certain situations from different angles. I now have new perspectives that help me understand certain situations that have puzzled me. Okay, so that, if you remember what some of the course goals were, that's what I hoped would happen. It is demanding to be a participant in this course, but very helpful. And I want to highlight this a little bit because one thing that I, as a North American coming to Norway, to the university, found strange is that several times I've had people say to me, you know, I feel like I don't know why, but I'm kind of scared to demand too much of the students. You know, and I think maybe we have different understandings of what we mean by demanding things of students, but I think that what we can demand is that they are engaged, that they are learning, and we have to construct situations that encourage that kind of engagement. And when people are really engaged in learning something that they are intrinsically motivated to learn, and we can help heighten the intrinsic motivation, that they find it useful and meaningful. Finally, it was interesting to come so close to your colleagues and that all of us were very engaged and serious at the same time. So this was a surprise. So I want to point out, what is it that participants find meaningful about this learning experience? One thing it's important to say is that people have chosen to come to this course. So they are intrinsically motivated to learn. But I do think that the methodology heightens that motivation. Another is that the course engages them emotionally. It engages them socially. It engages them even physically, right? This is very embodied, the experience. They're actually physically taking on different roles and trying things out. But it also engages them intellectually, and they're working in really deep ways with the course concepts. And even though most of you don't use theater in your teaching, and maybe that would be difficult for you to do, there's no reason why the courses that you teach cannot be as engaging, no matter what the level is or how many people are in the class. So for example, at the Hemmel Center, which is part of our faculty, the students are involved in problem-based learning, where they work in small groups on real-life, complex problems. In the biology department at our university, groups of students collect water samples around Bergen Kommune. They do analysis of water quality. That data gets sent back to Bergen Kommune, so it's actually making a real contribution to the city. And then those students are actually also paired with artists in different artistic media to improve their science communication skills. And their final exam is a presentation of their project using different artistic means of presentation. So there are many, the possibilities are endless. I think it's very important to remember what Torben was telling us, that this needs to be sort of planned in a way that's purposeful, right? Hensiktsmessig, that we don't just do things for the sake of making them fun or interesting, but that they are really anchored in what we think will lead to deep learning. But there's a lot that you can do. The only last thing I want to share with you is this is a quite well-known set of 7 principles for good practice in undergraduate education, but I think it is relevant for education across the lifespan, actually, from Chickering and Gamson, and they synthesized many years of research to put these together. And they say that good practice in teaching encourages student-faculty contact. So, for example, Mark was talking about how they engage students in trying to get feedback. In a conversation that I had with Mark a while ago, he said, well, the students tell us, there's not that many courses where we feel like we're seen as individuals the way we are in your course. Good practice encourages cooperation among students. Good practice encourages active learning, which pretty much is what I've been talking about the last 15 minutes. Good practice gives prompt feedback and also encourages students to make use of that feedback. Good practice emphasizes time on task. So this is exactly what Torben was talking about. What are students doing when we're with them, but what are they doing when we're not with them? Good practice communicates high expectations, and good practice represents diverse talents and ways of learning. And I think when we think about how do we engage students, many of these concepts around good practice are related to student engagement. Okay, so finally, I have actually 3, not 2, take-home messages. One is that when we talk about quality, what we are focused on is what are students learning and how are they learning. That students learn when they're engaged, with the caveat that we want them to be engaged in meaningful, purposeful activity, and that you can engage your students no matter what teaching situation you're in. And that's it. So from my perspective, I teach in the program for Universitetspedagogikk, University Teaching and Learning. And the people who come to take these courses are colleagues from around the university. They are coming in order to enhance their teaching, to have opportunities to reflect on what they're already doing, experiment with new things. So from my perspective, quality in education has many different components. What I talked about today was the importance of engaging students in meaningful learning activities that will encourage deep learning. I think that, like Torben Jensen said earlier today, it's very important to think about the whole, not only what we actually do when we're in the classroom with students, but quality comes from the planning process, that the learning goals that we have are tightly aligned with the kind of assessment that we have and what we do in the classroom. But today what I spoke about is really thinking about what is it we do when we are with students? What are ways to engage them, inspire them, excite them, both socially, emotionally, physically even, but absolutely intellectually and academically? So I think in order to enhance quality in education at the university, there are things that we need at many different levels. One is on the level of leadership, that the leadership of the university needs to really invest in enhancing teaching and also in creating the sort of resources and the conditions for quality education. So one of the things that the leadership of the university is now doing is, for example, investing in both digitalization of teaching and learning, and also in the university pedagogy program, and trying to expand opportunities for people to engage in thinking about teaching and learning. I think that very key is for us to think, when we think about our role as educators, that we not think about, okay, today I'm going to walk in and I'm going to talk about X and Y. I'm going to talk about cognitive psychology, I'm going to specifically talk about blah blah, or I'm going to talk about seismic waves and the causation of earthquakes. Instead, we need to think about what is it that students are doing. So when we have this time together with the students, and when the students are working on materials outside of the lecture hall or the classroom, what is it that they are doing in order to learn? So I think that the most important element of enhancing quality in education is that we start from a student learning perspective, that we think all the time, what is it that students are doing in order to learn? And that will help us design both learning programs and activities that will enhance their learning. In a sense, it's my personal opinion based on my background knowledge in education, but I would say that this is kind of the current thinking in university teaching and learning as a field. So many years of educational research have led us to understand that in order to have the highest quality education, we need to really be thinking not about, are the students good students or bad students? As teachers, are we good or bad teachers? Do we have all the right tricks and tips and tools? But more, okay, what is it students are doing when they are engaged in learning activities? And how is it that we are assessing their learning? Because students will really focus on the assessment to drive the activities they engage in, both inside and outside of the classroom, as they prepare and as they learn.